Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Bad Thought Studios. Today we got a special guest, my buddy JaySherer. We're going to be talking a lot of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. One thing that we've been, planning for the last couple weeks, maybe month, is to talk about this. And I love getting people's opinions on season 8 and stuff like that. So I want to get into it. But first, I want to introduce JaySherer. If you could tell the people who you are and kind of what you do, first time on this channel.
Yeah, for sure. So I am many things. One of the things I am, though, is I am a writer and director. So I write and direct film. I've also directed and written full cast audiobooks. So I love writing, love storytelling, love all aspects of storytelling, and I love getting involved with that kind of thing. I also do marketing on the side. It's less interesting to people for the purposes of this show. Yeah, and I also am on the Orange Grove 55 podcast. We do a show called The Story Geeks where we dive deep into all kinds of stories. We've been doing a lot of Disney stuff lately because Orange Grove 55 is all about Disney, but we get into all kinds of stuff on that channel too. So it won't be just Disney, but we go really deep into asking questions about the story, how it's impacting society, all that kind of good stuff. So you can check me out over on Orange Grove 55 there. And then I also have my own YouTube channel, which I haven't posted to in a while, but I am going to do a series on directing my first film, which I just did. I'm going to do a whole series on that, and that's going to be over at How Stories Work with JaySherer, which is a YouTube channel.
Yeah, perfect. And we're gonna have everything on in the description below of where you be and all the links of your social medias. If you guys haven't seen our Bad Thoughts podcast episode we did with Jay, it was an amazing episode. I had a great time. He kind of goes into his short film that he just got done filming, No Vacancy, which will be out soon, maybe next month or the month February, from what I'm told, right? Yeah.
January, February, and we have a trailer coming out hopefully in December. Hopefully by the end of
Ooh.
December, we'll have a trailer out for you guys.
Beautiful. And definitely want to see that. But yeah, guys, go check out JaySherer. Everything he does is, everything he touches turns to gold. So go see him. So yeah, let's get into it, Jay. I love Game of Thrones, of course, one of my favorite shows of all time. Unfortunately, season 8 didn't end as well as I wanted to, but at the same time, people did have a good, they liked it. They had their views on it, but they liked it, which it wasn't common. But what's your opinion? What's your thoughts on season 8 of Game of Thrones?
Okay, so in order to give my thoughts on season 8, I have to give a little bit of background into where I think the show started to go off the rails. Although I don't think a lot of people necessarily perceived it at first, because I would go all the way back to there's a singular moment, and it's after. So for those who don't know, Game of Thrones
I'm excited.
based off
I'm
the
excited for
books.
this. I'm excited for this because
Yeah,
I have the same thing.
oh, you got the same thing?
Yes.
We'll compare notes.
All right.
So Game of Thrones is based off a series of books by George R.R. Martin, but the show got out ahead of the books because George R.R. Martin takes forever to finish the books. And so the show got out ahead of the books. And so the creators then had to figure out, like, well, how are we going to end this thing? How are we going to land this plane? But there's one moment where I think that encapsulates the impending doom of like unraveling the rest of the season. Not that it was so bad, but it was so out of context with what had come before it. So if you think about like what embodies Game of Thrones, there's several things. One, it's a very human story. Like you could almost assume that George R.R. Martin is writing just a historical account of things that happened in the past, because you can go find like examples of like, this brother and sister were hooking up, or
Exactly.
this kind of violence was taking place or whatever. So it's a very human story, which means that there's not a lot of what we generally find in fantasy, which is this overriding sense that like if people do good things happen, right? You get that from the very first season, because from the very first episode, you're basically like, oh, you like this guy? He's dead. You know what I mean? Like anybody who's good is just boom, they're gone. And so with Game of Thrones, to me, what George R.R. Martin was trying to do was he was trying to showcase the inherent depravity of mankind, especially if those people were vying for more control. And he's like, what does that look like? What does it look like to play with a theme of people vying for more control? It's like straight up terrible, right? Like there's like no redeeming qualities amongst these folks. Somebody you think is good will turn bad. Somebody you think is bad will actually have some good moments, because that's kind of what being a human is like.
Yep.
The embodiment of that to me, and by the way, he's a very anti-war kind of guy, and he also has he doesn't want you to be satisfied with violence, which is key. It's a key,
Yep.
really, really key point. He never wants you to feel like violence is good, right? Like violence is always bad in whatever form it comes in. And an example of that is like when Joffrey, fucking Joffrey, when Joffrey dies, right? You have this idea that like, oh, maybe Sansa will just kill Joffrey. It'll be his heroic moment. But no, Joffrey dies in this moment where you're like, oh, dude, I don't even know if I wanted
Yeah.
to see him die that way. Like, it's
Exactly.
it's this very depressing. But what is it? It's one of the other characters being ruthless in trying to attain power. And so you don't get it doesn't become this thing that feels like, wow, justice was done. Instead, you feel like justice wasn't done. Sansa still feels terrible. Everyone's treating her terrible. Like, this is horrible. Okay, so when does all of that end, and when does the new regime take over and it doesn't feel like Game of Thrones anymore? To me, it was, I believe it's either season 5 or season 6. I think it was season 6. I'd have to go look it up to be exact. But it's the moment when Sansa releases the dogs on, was it named Bolton? Ramsay Bolton?
Well,
Is that who it was?
Ramsey Bone. Yeah.
Yeah. Why did that feel so incorrect? Everything that was the story was the way that story was told was Sansa has been abused. She has every right to take this guy out. But that's not the normal Game of Thrones way that things go down. And so what happens? We get the rising theme. We see her back we know that she's the one that released the dogs on him, and she got revenge, and it was justified. And we're like, yeah, go Sansa. Wait a minute. That's not Game of Thrones. That's never
Yeah.
been Game of Thrones. Like, that is a weird moment in the history of Game of Thrones. And what you see from that moment on, before we get your take on where
Yeah.
you saw it go downhill, what you see happen is from then on, you get these like rising heroic moments, like things are going to happen and people are important and things matter and everyone's in their specific place for a reason. And you're like, what? That doesn't feel
Yep.
like anything that came before this. And so that's why I think season 8 doesn't resonate with a lot of people. I thought it was okay because a chaos story is difficult to end.
Yep.
And so I felt like, okay, well, this is going to be a difficult story to end. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But I wasn't, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, like it was a 6. And I'm mainly giving it that score because I love fantasy shows and I
Yeah.
give them a lot of grace. But it was not the best way to end the Game of Thrones series, in my opinion. What about you?
Yeah.
What do you think? Where did it go wrong? What do you think?
So, for the one you're referring to, I believe is I believe that it's in season 7 because
Oh,
it was after Battle of the Bastards
yeah,
when they captured Ramsay Bolton, or it was the beginning. It was either season 6 or season 7
okay,
because I know season 7 and 8 were based off or not based off the books because at the in the books it was season 7. Pretty much season 6 was the end of the books.
yeah,
So Jon Snow did come back in season 7, or yeah, season 7, and then Battle of the Bastards happened in season 7. So when they took over Winterfell back, then that's when Ramsay was killed by Sansa by the dogs.
got it, got it, got it,
So
got it.
for me, there's actually two. One was when Daenerys went to help the Dothraki defeat the Lannisters when they first saw the dragons, the Lannisters, and
Mhm.
she had burned, I believe is Tarly or Tully, the father and the son.
Oh,
She
yeah, 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 yeah. It's when the dragon's up on the mountain.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah. Mhm.
She didn't show any mercy. She burned the father and the son,
Yeah,
which was out of character, but I don't know the character arc that George R. R. Martin wanted her to go as,
right,
but that's something that we didn't witness prior. It
right.
was her doing that. If I wanted to go towards season 8, where something kind of clicked,
Mm,
was when Sam told Jon Snow who he truly was,
yeah.
And after that, besides the long night,
Yeah.
after that, um, everything just went downhill to me. The fucking um the attitude towards Daenerys,
Yeah.
like he was just acting really, really weird. I know we all knew who he eventually was going to be, named, but I
Mhm.
didn't like the way Jon Snow's character went. It was almost like he was cold
Yeah.
towards Daenerys, even though it wasn't her, it wasn't her fault. It was just
Mhm.
who he was. It just seemed weird. Like the character seemed weird at that point,
Yeah.
and then ever since from that point on, Jon Snow was just this weird character to me. He was
He
just
was
so
pretty
different.
strange.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, the long night was cool.
Yeah.
One thing that pissed me off was at the end, he yells at the dragon,
Oh,
the
yeah.
dragon, the one that the Night King eventually turned.
Yeah, yeah.
He yelled at him for some reason. Like it was just a weird event. I did enjoy the actual long night episode, but there were just certain things that kind of, and then of course when Arya ended up defeating, the what's his name? She stabbed the Night King.
Yeah, 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 Night King.
A lot of people didn't like that.
Yeah.
People wanted it to be Jon Snow,
Right.
and the directors or the show writers, what's their names? I think they're like San.
Oh, man. What are their names?
Why am I blanking on them?
I can see their faces because
Yeah,
I've
me too.
yeah, but oh,
It's
something
like
in Weiss.
Weiss.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
something in Weiss. Whatever.
yeah. Anyway, they initially wanted it to be the Hound or what's her name, the tall girl knight. Why am I blanking
Oh,
on
yeah,
names?
yeah, yeah.
It's
Gwendolyn Christie's
irritating.
character. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yes,
know who you're talking about.
they initially wanted them to be the ones that killed the Night King
Mm,
and not Jon Snow. So which was
yeah,
it was just weird. But that turn of event or that part right there is when I seen a difference in Game of Thrones, and
yeah.
it bugged me, and it bugged me.
I think it's weird to me that something that's so heavily foreshadowed throughout the entire series is the White Walkers,
Mhm.
and yet they play zero role in season 8. Right? Like
Yep,
it's just weird for that arc to have been completed by season 7, and it almost feels at that point like you could have just ended it and just said like, yeah, like in other words, the question that's always on our minds, right? Like this is like a question that we deal with like as humans in the modern day is this idea that like we could all band together to fight something that was bigger than us, right? Like aliens could show up, it's Independence
yeah,
Day.
yeah,
Will we all band together, or will like some of you not band together, or will you even team up with the enemy or whatever? All of those themes are really interesting because it is like playing the Game of Thrones, right? You're trying to figure
exactly.
out like, well, what's the best route for me to get more power or get more influence or get whatever. And then when you take that off the table in season 7, it's kind of like, well, whoever gets whatever's left over, it kind of sucks anyways. I mean, the whole thing is just like, it just feels like it lands the plane in a way where it's trying to get us to like some of the characters, despite the fact that most of the time has been spent with us liking and disliking every character. And
Yep.
it's just a strange, I think endings are very, very difficult, and especially if you have like a fantasy story that is based off real life. Real life rarely ends the way that we want it to end, right? It sometimes does, right? Sometimes Hitler gets defeated, and that's good. But there's other times when it's like, yeah, there's still pain and hurt in the world, and there's still crazy dictators in the world, and there's still things that even the countries that we believe in are good countries are doing bad things. So
Yeah.
it's very real life. It's very Game of Thrones like. If you open the paper, it sounds like Game of Thrones. If you read the daily news, right?
Exactly.
You, but but then when you try to take that and like have this chaos narrative come into this shaped heroic narrative near the end, and that's hard to do. That's really hard to do. And I'm not even sure if I'm not even confident that George R. R. Martin has ever intended to do that. And I think
Mhm.
that's probably why he doesn't finish any of the books. He's like, I don't know how to land this plane. Like this is just madness, and
Oh,
no one will ever get
yeah,
to me.
I agree with that part. And the one thing that uh, we talked about this in a different episode. The main part of what pissed me off, I'll
Mm,
speak for myself. One thing that pissed me off was the character arc
Mhm.
for Daenerys and Jon Snow, it to me were the best character arcs of
Yeah.
all time.
Oh,
Of all
nice.
time. And the character arcs show we kind of they kind of foreshadowed where we thought and wanted it to go. Of
Mhm.
course, if you want to go a different way, go a different way. But the to kill off those two character arcs on something that didn't have to happen.
Yeah.
You could have gone two different ways, and it just to me it killed their character arcs
Yeah.
from being these people who had no chance of ruling to finally them having the chance to rule even together was
Yeah.
something that I would have loved to see. But
Totally.
no, they literally kill off both characters with one dagger into the chest.
Yeah.
And oh my god, man, it was painful to watch two characters like that just be killed, not killed off literally. Oh, Daenerys was killed off literally, but
Yeah.
just to end it like that, it killed their character arcs to me.
Well, and
And
that was very odd too, right? Because the signal that the showrunners were sending us was that, and I'm this is very difficult in writing anyways. So like it's difficult in writing because like you might think to yourself like I want things to go this way, but like you by mistake send some signals. Like for example, let's just say that you want like one of your characters to turn bad, but you just happen to cast somebody that the audience just loves and they would never see as bad. And then like
yeah,
all of a sudden you like make them bad and they're like, "What? How are they bad?"
yeah,
But so there's some things that like that are difficult to control because sometimes audiences can fall in love with things that you didn't intend for them to fall in love with. But the signal that is sent throughout the first at least 5 or 6 seasons is that Jon Snow and Daenerys are both super important and both have a rightful place on the highest throne.
yeah,
And when they take over people, they don't always do it right, but they do it in such a way where they seem like they're at least better than the people who came before them. So
exactly.
when you end their arcs with like a sort of a whimper instead of like a big like heroic moment, and you instead focus on these other characters who you're like maybe they'll solve all the problems because Daenerys and John won't. You're like, but will they? I don't think they will. You know, what I mean? It's very, it's just weird. It's weird. I agree with you.
Yep.
That part of it just does not work at all.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to ask you, and I really am interested in hearing this answer, is as a writer and director yourself, what's one way you would end season 8 of Game of Thrones? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to give the whole season, just an ending that, because I've thought about it, and there's so many different ways I've heard, but I'd
Yeah.
love to hear your opinion on how you would end season 8.
So this is difficult because I think that like this might piss a bunch of people off as well, but in a totally different way. In my opinion, the premise of the show should remain intact by the end of the last episode.
Hmm.
In my opinion, the premise of the show was those who want power uh, can gain power, but it's the old adage of uh, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And that to me is the show. Like that's the theme of the show. And
Yeah.
so in this case, what I would have done was I would have said I would not have end I would first of all I would not have ended the White Walkers in season 7, right? Like I would have kept them going all through season 8. And what I would have had was I would have built up, and I think that they were doing this a little bit already, which is why I think this is disappointing. But I would have built up a couple characters as feeling like they were going to take over in a heroic way. But at the end of the day, what I would have had them actually do is once they defeat the White Walkers, and you think it's going to be this like heroic, like changing of how Westeros is actually managed,
Yeah.
and then it's going to be everyone's going to be happy and together and all that kind of stuff. I would have actually showcased like no, it's right back to where it was before. It's just a different players playing the game. So you
Okay.
thought that these people were cool. You thought that Tyrion Lannister was at least better than his parents. He's not better than his parents. It's just different. And
Hmm.
you thought that Sansa would be better than her parents. She's not better than her parents. It's just different, right? Um,
Okay.
that's what I would have done because to me that maintains the premise of the show. Like we we think we would like to make heroes and villains of people, but the reality is every single human being is part hero, part villain.
Yeah.
And that's not going to change when someone else takes over the game, the throne, right?
Yeah.
When someone wins the throne, it doesn't mean that everything is just fine and dandy. It just means that a different group of people is angry. And that's what I would have done,
Okay.
which would make people mad. But I think it's at least maintaining the premise of what he was trying to accomplish.
Exactly. Oh, and I would never have thought of that. That's a great ending, honestly. Um, Mine was pretty much straightforward. I would have loved to see Daenerys kind of get on the throne
Mm,
and see her people for the first time as she ruled,
mm,
and then you know even okay, I'll even put it this way. If she would have been there for a while and
mhm.
then over time shown that she was going crazy and then
Yeah.
John did what he did,
Right.
perfect.
Right.
But from you know I would have loved to see her see King's Landing for the first time as
Mm,
her on the throne and see
mhm.
the people love her and all that stuff, and then eventually something happens with her or whatever. But I at least wanted to see her get back to her people, get
Right.
back to a Targaryen running Westeros. I would have loved that. And even if Jon Snow, I would have loved to see him be the, uh, king consort maybe, or something in that realm of them being together. I thought would have been perfect. We finally get to see them in season 6 or 7 for the first time, Daenerys and John, which it took like from 1 to 6 was like 8 years or something like that
Yeah.
that they finally meet each other, and then a season later she's killed by him.
Yeah.
Like, but anyway, I would have
Yeah,
loved to see.
so I like what you're saying there, because so let's talk about hero's journey, like Star Wars type thing, right? Like
Okay.
you battle against the forces of evil, and then you rise above those things. Like the ending that we all thought that could be, if we were going to go that route, which I don't think is a terrible route to go, because John and Daenerys are overcoming a lot of things along the way. In fact,
Exactly.
you could have had Tyrion, you could have had Sansa, you could have had Arya, all of those same characters who end up there kind of at the end. You could have had them being the what do they call the king's, like the king's advisors, that little group, whatever they call that group, I
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
remember.
yeah. The advisors, yeah,
Yeah, but they could have all been in that room. Like
yep,
John could have been the hand, Daenerys could have been the queen. Like it could have all worked out that way, and that would have been like the traditional fantasy Star Wars kind of ending. And
yeah,
they clearly didn't want that, but what they gave us instead was this, like, it's almost like what they gave us was as if in Star Wars, all of a sudden at the end, like a bunch of the minor characters got to be ruling everyone, but they're still not going to do a good job. It's like, what if we just made the Ewoks the rulers of everybody, and like
yeah,
Luke is like
exactly.
dead, Luke's dead, like and it's just it just doesn't work that well. It doesn't work that well. But
Yeah,
I think you can go either way. You can kind of go with maintain the premise all the way through, or you can pivot and do the hero's journey premise that actually ends at a place where the audience is really like excited. Like that's what we want to see in the world.
yeah. Exactly. It's funny how Star Wars always it comes back to Game of Thrones. I
Yeah.
think it's the funniest thing ever because I'm sure you know this already that Benioff, by the way, David Benioff
Yeah.
and Weiss, they had the project for Star
You
Wars
did.
that, and then they're like, oh, this was season 8. Nah, I'm good.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
night.
I know. They did that to Patty Jenkins. They did that to Ryan Johnson, Patty Jenkins, Taika Waititi. I mean, the list of people that they've done that to is like insanely high. It's like, oh, Patty Jenkins, you get a Rogue Squadron movie. Oh, wait, you made Wonder Woman 1984? Like, you're out.
God, man,
Yeah,
it's
it's brutal.
hilarious. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's to wrap up season 8. I would love for them to do something, maybe like a short film or something that
Mm,
kind of, or alternate ending. I think that would be dope eventually. I mean, it's probably not gonna happen, but
yeah.
one can only wish.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving on. Season 1 of House of the Dragon.
Mm,
I'll start off on this one.
cool.
Season 1 was going into it,
Mhm,
didn't have high hopes just because of how season 8 ended.
mhm.
Um, I didn't know time jumps were going to happen,
Right.
changing of actresses and actors were going to happen. I knew going in before season 1 even started, I knew all that was going to happen. So in my head, I'm like, I'm going to watch it. If it's good, it's good. It's bad, it's bad. I'm no high hopes.
Mhm.
But Man, they pulled this off perfectly. And I honestly don't think another show could have done something like what they did when it came to the time jumps, changing of actresses or actors. And it was so hard. It was a hard thing to do, and they pulled it off
Mhm.
perfectly, in my opinion. And all the action and the storyline and all that stuff. I think season one was a 10 out of 10. And I'm just as excited to see season two. But what's your thoughts on season one?
I loved it too. In fact, it was one of my top shows of the year. I put it up there with Last of Us. That Last of Us
Mm,
was a
beautiful.
great show. Um, Stranger Things, although that was technically I think last year if I'm not mistaken, but I
Yeah.
loved the Stranger Things season 4. What was the other show that there's a couple other shows. I was a huge fan of Better Call Saul. Um,
Was it good? I've yet to watch it. Was it
oh,
good?
I love it. Yeah, it's one of
Yeah.
my favorite shows of all time. Yeah. Have you seen Breaking
Man,
Bad?
I have.
Yeah.
I have, but I didn't finish it.
Ah,
I always get sidetracked when it comes to TV shows, and
yeah.
for some reason, Breaking Bad, even though it's on top of everyone's list, I should have watched it.
Yeah, you gotta finish it. But finish that first and then watch Better Call Saul.
Gotcha.
Um, they did something really, really smart with House of the Dragon, and it's a very difficult thing to do because um Hollywood in general and audiences in general, they want you to follow a pattern that I think is very difficult, if not impossible. I think the MCU is actually stuck in this kind of phase too. Um, so because a general story will start here and then have rising action as it heads toward its climax, and then it has its resolution. Because that rising action is so thrilling to an audience, audiences tend to, therefore studios tend to want you to start your next series on like a higher plane than you started your first series, right? So in other
Gotcha.
words,
Gotcha.
like if it's like, okay, you can do Captain America, you can do Thor, you can do, but then we're going to lead to Avengers. And then it's like,
Yeah.
then after Avengers, we're going to go to the next, like it's the global threat. And then after the global threat, it's a cosmic threat, like,
Yeah.
and it just keeps getting crazier.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very difficult for storytellers to keep that rising action going in that pattern because it gets more and more ludicrous, and so the suspension of disbelief gets harder. Bringing in characters that make sense gets harder. Upgrading the characters that you've already put in place gets harder. So the one thing that I really loved that Game of Thrones did was that they said, I don't really love prequels if I'm being honest, but the
Hmm.
prequel is so far removed from the other book series. I think it's okay and it's fine. It doesn't
Yeah.
like it doesn't interfere. But one of the things I love that they did was they basically said like, no, 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 cut out all that noise. We're not going to just go back to like all of a sudden dragons are going to be fighting each other every day, like, and there's going to be these giant big wars all over. No, no, no. We're going to make it a very personal story. It's going to be focused on a limited set of characters. We're basically going to reset everything back. We're not going to like
Yeah.
say like, oh, it's got to be crazier and more people and global threat. And I think that was genius because
Oh yeah.
now you can get that same kind of like focused storytelling around characters, and they did that so incredibly well. I mean, there's a few like I don't think I'd give it a 10 out of 10. I think I gave it like a 9.25 out of 10. It's like very high, like really
Oh yeah.
really
Yeah.
high
Yeah.
because I
Oh
loved
yeah.
it. But I think there's a few things that probably to me could have been a little smoother. Like I don't mind the actor swap at all. I don't mind that
Yeah.
time jump. Totally fine. It wasn't like I was
And
pissed about it.
And real quick,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off. One thing that I think they pulled off better than anyone else was not only did the actors or the actresses look or feel the same,
Yeah.
they also literally look the same.
I know.
If that was the younger version of them, I would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, that looks just like them.
Yeah, it's so
It was
true.
crazy. It was crazy.
That's
But go
so
ahead.
true. No, no, yeah, the one thing I think I would say about the age swap and the actress swap,
Mhm.
I actually don't think it was necessary because I think you could have told like let's face it, like they're gonna do 4 seasons, I think now, is
Yeah, that
if
yeah.
I'm correct about that, and they didn't know how many they were gonna do at first, but they're like, okay, we'll do 4. The weird thing about TV is that it tends to be, this is not always true. It's a little bit more difficult at HBO, so maybe this is not true in HBO. But a lot of times, like, the show gets more and more profitable as it goes on, right? It doesn't start out now with House of the Dragon. Maybe it starts out at a higher profitability standpoint because, and again, HBO doesn't have ads, so like profitability is weird to determine. It's a
Yeah,
totally different equation. But you know, usually more and more people start to watch the more seasons you have. So I was just surprised they didn't take their time and do like one season with all young people, and then now we do the time jump and have another season, because why not
yeah.
have more seasons is what I was thinking they would do, but they're just not in the same mindset as that for some reason. So
That's a great point.
the only thing that I felt was weird about the time jump was that the young actress for, I can't even remember her name.
Allison,
Um, is that the main who the no not Allison, the Targaryen, the
Rhaenyra,
main, what's that?
Rhaenyra.
Yeah, Rhaenyra. Yeah, thank you.
You're
It
good.
wasn't Rhaenyra, but Rhaenyra. Yeah,
Yeah.
Rhaenyra. Um, the young actress, I thought did a 10 out of 10 job. Like,
Hmm.
not even like everything about what she did, I believe. Like when she was kind of like, should I like my uncle? Like the way she handled that was like 10 out of 10, phenomenal.
Yeah.
She was also super badass.
Oh yeah.
Like just insanely badass. So like I was thinking, okay, so then when we see her as an older person, she's gonna be even more dug into like, this is the way I do things. I'm still tough. I'm still badass. What's really fascinating to me is that the person who took over the role, I can't remember her name offhand, the actor's name, but when that person took over the role, um, it was a way more vulnerable person.
Oh yeah.
Like the Rhaenyra was way more vulnerable, and I thought that was a really bold choice. But I also found it kind of fascinating because I would have thought that it would have gone the other way. Like like the character would be,
Vulnerable as a young girl, and
yes,
then I gotcha.
yes, yeah. So that was a little bit of a interesting choice in my mind that maybe I would say is it made the suspension of disbelief harder. I was able to
Mhm.
get over it. Don't get me wrong. I still thought, because I
Yeah.
think both, basically what I'm saying is both performers were 10 out of 10, but
Oh
it
yeah.
felt like it's like, whoa, what happened in between? Because now she's like more vulnerable in her later years, but I would have thought she would have been like swapped. Now I wonder what happened in the
Yeah,
middle, you
what
know?
exactly. You think of why she became vulnerable
Exactly.
as an adult, and
Exactly.
I do agree that the little uh, we could speculate, of course, of that little time gap. I'm not sure if it in the books they actually, you know, do a time jump in the books.
I don't know.
No one knows, but that is a great question. I never really thought of what happened between that time jump to make her, you know, a little bit more vulnerable. Of course, she had children, and you know that could have been it, but it's a great question. Never even thought about that. What one thing one thing that did piss me off in the show,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, it do you remember when Aegon went missing, when Viserys died? Aegon went missing. It was
Yep.
Damon's like mistress or whoever she was. They went to go see the girl
Mhm.
to see if she knew where Aegon was,
Mhm.
and I think it was always forget her name, but her accent in the
Mm.
show, I don't know if it was forced, if it was I don't know. It really confused me why they would have her in that spot. And I could be just being an asshole, but
Yeah.
her accent sounded terrible. And I don't
Ah.
know if it was like a real accent of somewhere in somewhere I've never heard of, or if it was her like a fake accent she was putting on. It just didn't seem authentic to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I could be the only one. I don't know if you remember her accent at
I
all.
don't remember her accent. I'm trying to remember that scene, but I don't remember that scene at all. But I
Uh,
will say, to pick up on something you were just mentioning, I mean, like, how realistic is it for the families? Like for the kid to go like, I'm just gonna run away and like go fly on
yeah,
a dragon and stuff, right? And then like for the families to have the issues that they have, like this Christmas, which is coming up in another week,
yeah.
there will be families that literally have a minor version of what Game of Thrones was dealing
Yeah.
with. Where like, oh, my cousin's being an asshole, and then I hit him or whatever, and now there's this big fight amongst the families of which cousin should have
Yeah.
for them to pull that kind of stuff off and for it to seem so real is
Yeah.
insane. Like that's
Yeah.
just awesome writing.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Um, yeah. Season 2 trailer came out.
Yeah.
Me personally, I've watched it a couple times. Of course, we did an episode and kind of broke down the stills of the trailer. But yeah, what'd you think of the season 2 trailer?
I liked it a lot. I think one of the things I'm always a little bit cautious with Game of Thrones trailers because one of the things that they do with the trailers is they tend to put so I talked about that rising action.
Yeah.
They tend to build the trailer with all of the peak points of rising action, right? It's like two dragons about to face off, like
Yeah.
somebody's freaking out, and there's like a lot of and yet when you go to watch the show, a lot of the show is built off of these intense moments of like interpersonal drama that slowly build, which I love. I love slow
Yeah.
builds. I like one of my things that I like to compare to like good, really, really good storytelling like Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones. I compare it to Ozark, which no offense to the Ozark people, that's just a different style that I don't prefer as much. Is that Ozark takes like Ozark goes 0 to 100 in like 2 seconds flat. It's like they'll
Oh
be like
wow.
having a normal conversation, and all of a sudden it's like, I have a gun. You're like, what? What's happening? But Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad, they don't do that. Like every little bit increases the tension, just little bit, little bit, little
Yeah.
bit, little bit, little bit. The reason I don't like the other style is because it feels kind of soap opera-ish to me. Like, you're
Okay.
the father? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and then it just like I don't like that as much. I like the gradual build. And I think that we in the trailer, we're seeing a bunch of intense moments, and I guarantee you, most of the season will still be the minor building, like little
Yeah.
like tension between people and those kind of things. So I do think the trailer was awesome, but I think that it'll take us a while to get to a lot of the elements that are in the trailer.
Exactly. And the the one thing I loved about the trailer, of course, it was a teaser trailer. We weren't getting too much from it, but it still showed us enough.
Yeah.
It showed us what we will expect. We're gonna expect a knife to Helena's throat. We're gonna expect
Mhm.
dragons aiming on Vagar. And by the way, in the trailer, he is huge, dude,
Yeah.
huge. But and also aiming looking at the throne, wondering what it would be like if he said, and those stills alone, those 1 second or yeah, like less than a second clips, it told us, what we're gonna expect in season 2. So I thought it was perfect. I thought it was something, especially something we really needed because of the how long it takes to make this
Oh,
season. So
so long.
yeah. And do you think that like they do it maybe like a year and a half or two, like because
Mm.
it takes that long to film? Do you think they do it because they want to put more time into it? But what makes this show from season
Mm.
1 to 2 that much long, like that big of a period? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so here this
Because
is
most of the material is written, you know what I'm saying, because of the
right,
books and all that
right,
stuff.
right.
So that's what kind of always confused me. I really never.
Well, here's my take on that. My take on that is that every major every major series that I know that has transformed from being one of the best shows you've ever seen to something where you're like, I'm not sure why I'm even watching this anymore. They all they all fell into this. And I think Disney's in this place right now with both the MCU and with Star Wars. And it's basically that the creators don't have enough time to spend on their products, films or TV shows, in a way that results in the best possible product being out there. The most common way that shows kind of falter in what audiences like about them is that they were rushed. Because like when you look across the board and you say like, well, how does somebody go from being the most beloved director or writer to being like a writer that people are like, I can
Yeah.
guarantee you it's almost always they didn't have enough time. And then they were in demand and they're like, I'm just going to start getting paychecks and like, I'll have the next movie out next year. Well, the problem with that is you can't take the steps you need to learn what's working and what's not working. You can't take your time to get all of your costume design like really, really solid. Today it's VR, right? Or VX. It's
Mhm.
like, are we going to have our CG look good or is the CG going to look pretty shitty? I mean, like that's a big deal, right? Like
Yep.
Marvel has had some pretty shitty CG in its
Yeah.
films lately. And you're like, well, how does that happen? It's like because they're doing 4 a year and they have to
Yep.
work with a bunch of different studios to do it, as opposed to saying, we're going to take 2 years to put this together, like Game of Thrones is saying, we're going to take 2 years to put this together. But when you see Vagar is gonna look fucking awesome, right? Like,
Yep.
so that's the difference to me is like give the creators as much time as they feel like they need within reason, of course. We've
Yeah.
also heard horror stories of people just taking budgets and like, you know, going and partying instead of making the movies.
Oh, yeah.
But for the
Actually, that one dude, fuck, did you hear about that?
I did, I
Oh
did
my
hear about that.
god,
That was
man.
the one that popped into my head when I was thinking about. I'm like,
God,
what? The guy's
that's
like,
crazy.
yeah, that was nuts. I can't remember who that was, but it was a Netflix show, right?
Yeah, Netflix,
Yeah.
yep.
Anyway, so that's kind of my thought process is like I'm kind of willing, like for example, Stranger Things season 4 got put on hold because of the pandemic.
Oh, okay, and the strike
Yeah.
too.
And yeah, well, technically season 4 came out before season 5 is on
Oh,
hold because of the
season oh,
strike.
gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
But
Yeah,
season
yeah.
4 I think was really good because they went back over every single script during the pandemic and were like, what's working, what's not working. And to me, that's like they got lucky with extra time. And I
Oh, yeah.
loved season 4. I thought season
See,
4
yeah.
was awesome.
One of the best parts in that is when they're rocking out on top of the fucking trailer
Yeah,
home.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, that has to go down in history for one of like the best parts in a TV show. I thought it was crazy.
And one of my favorite parts is like right after that when Nancy pulls out the shotgun and shoots
Oh,
Vecna
yep.
out the building. You know, like
Yep.
I was like, dude, that those moments are so epic. And like I don't think you get those if you say like, hey, you have 6 months to do a show, do it.
True. True.
So that's my take, but you know, I could be
True.
wrong.
No, I agree, and I don't mind, of course, like you said, within reason
Yeah.
of a something being done. But if you take your time with it and you are known to put out a good product, by all means, do what you need to do.
Yeah,
Do what you need to
exactly.
do.
Exactly.
Moving on. George R. R. Martin spent 2 days locked in a room with House of the Dragon showrunner Ryan Condal and other writers planning season 3 and 4. I talked to OG about this, and I love the word he used was they have confidence in
Mm.
season 2 and how well it's going to do, and they're already planning season 3 and 4, which is I mean, of course, you plan for multiple seasons like they did before even season 1 came out. They had planned for like if they need to tell this story, it's going to take 4 or 5 seasons.
Yep.
So but sometimes TV shows don't do well where they're not getting enough viewers and they have to cut it short. But they have this much confidence where they're taking time and sitting down talking about seasons 3 and 4, which is I think is great. But what do you think about this?
I think it's really good. I think it's gonna teach us something too, because one of the questions that I mean, we started the show off with this, right? Like, what did you think of season 8? And it was very controversial season of television.
Yeah,
Um, I think that one of the lingering questions is, was season 8 bad because George R.R. Martin doesn't know how to land the plane? Or was season 8 bad because George R.R. Martin wasn't really all that involved and Benioff and Weiss kind of landed the plane and they didn't really understand what the theory was behind what Game
yeah,
of Thrones was supposed to be? The fact that we know this, that George R.R. Martin spent time with the writers planning how this series is going to end, it will answer the question of how involved was George R.R. Martin in the first one, right?
season
Yeah,
8, yeah.
if it feels like it's like ending in a way that doesn't make any sense, we'll go like, oh, okay, George R.R. Martin doesn't know how to land the plane. But if it's awesome, then we'll go like, oh yeah, they should have done that before with the other
Yep.
season. So I think that's really good. Again, like we just talked about, like I love the fact that people will spend more time breaking down story and trying to get to the best possible story, as opposed to thinking we have knights, we have dragons, and we have lots of conflict. Who cares how it ends, right?
Yeah.
I think that from a storytelling perspective, I love to hear these kind of stories as opposed to people just thinking like storytelling is easy and then you just throw things together and it's fine. Like it's not. It's
Yep.
not how it works. It's very, very difficult, and our brains are very much wired for storytelling. The bonus of that is when there's good stories, we love them and we can't wait to go back to them and talk about them. The
Yep.
bad news is if it's a bad story, our brain pick up on it real fast and go, "This doesn't make any sense. This is bullshit." Right? So, I love to see them do these kind of things, and I love that they have a plan for their later seasons because I think what they're trying to send a signal to us is that don't worry, we're not going to do what we did before and upset
Yeah.
everybody. We're going to really try and work this out in a way that makes sense.
Exactly. And to me, this shows how much people actually enjoyed season one.
Mhm.
Because before season one, or when, because this is, we're going into season two, going into season one, we didn't hear anything about any seasons after one.
Yeah.
So, this shows how much people actually loved season one and are looking forward to seasons 2, 3, and 4. So I love hearing about this. And like you said, showing that George R. R. Martin and his showrunners are working together to give us this and not just the showrunners doing their own thing, I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
Is
Absolutely.
beautiful. All right. We're gonna wrap it up with this question. And thinking about this question made me think of, OG and theme parks and all this stuff. And shout out to OG. I love that guy. I love George. Man, those guys are fucking perfect, man.
Yeah. That's really awesome.
This question came from watching I believe it was yesterday's episode. Anyway, if Game of Thrones had a ride at a theme park, what would that ride look like?
I mean, first of all, is this an adult only theme park? Because like I can
I
think of a
know.
lot of things that would go down on this ride that you don't want your kids seeing.
That's funny.
I think so. Okay, personally speaking, OG and I talk about this a lot. George, between the three of us, like George is the coaster guy. Like he's gonna want to go on all the coasters. OG and I like are gonna be like, chilling on a bench, sipping a rum and coke or something, and watching people walk by and enjoying the environment.
Yeah.
I think that there is I think that, in my opinion, Game of Thrones would make an awesome dark ride. So, dark ride, for those who don't, I know you know, but for those who don't know what a dark ride is, basically something that's not fast moving per se. It's not a roller coaster at all. It's something like Pinocchio or Mr. Toad, or maybe a more advanced dark ride would be something like Indiana Jones, where you're
Mhm.
moving through at a pretty slow pace, but there's plenty of things to see, and there's a story that's actually taking place, right? So, like for example, like I went on. I was in Orlando. I was living in Florida for like 5 or 6 months, and I went to Orlando and we went on the Harry Potter coaster. That's Hagrid's motorbike adventure, or whatever. Very well themed, fun little coaster. Way actually more intense than I was expecting it to be. There's one part. This is a little bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear this, fast forward. But there's one part of the ride where it stops you, and then the whole track is on a hydraulic lift, and it just drops you down to a different
Oh
track.
shit.
Yeah, it's nuts. And if you don't
Nice.
know that that's coming, you're like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Um, so okay, fun ride and all that. And you do kind of see some scenes, so it's kind of a coaster slash dark ride. But here's the thing: coasters have a very difficult time telling a story because you're just kind of just darting through things quickly.
Yeah.
What I think would be cool is if we actually saw a Game of Thrones ride that could be more of a thrill ride, like an Indiana Jones. It has some twists and turns, and
Yeah.
but we actually like slow down to see like scenes taking place where maybe there's animatronics doing, maybe there's an animatronic of what's Tyrion's dad's name? It starts with an L, I think. Whatever.
Yeah. Oh fuck.
Yeah, I don't remember what his name is.
Oh,
Um, it's not Tyrion Lannister, is it?
no, it's a Tyrion. Tyrion. No, not Tyrion. Jesus.
It's something
Um.
like that though.
Yes.
It's close. Anyway, there's a scene where we see animatronic Tyrion turn around, and then we see his dad on the toilet, and he just shoots him with the crossbow, right? Like that would be an awesome
Oh,
scene to
that's
like
funny.
pull in on. But I think that I would like to see like moments of the story that would take place in like a really creative way, and I don't think a coaster could get us there.
Yeah.
That'd be my thing. Do a dark ride that was like you could have you could have multiple rooms of each family, right? Like
Yeah.
what like the major moments that happen in those families. That'd be awesome.
That'd be actually pretty dope. I never thought
Yeah.
of something like that. Tywin, by the way, Tywin.
Tywin. I knew we were close.
Tywin.
I knew we were
Yes.
close. Yeah.
If I had to pick one, and I thought about this earlier. It would have to be something with dragons. I think
Yeah.
if you're maybe like on a roller coaster, and you know it could be something shaped as a dragon. I don't know, how they would do it, but I think a dragon themed like dog fight, maybe you would feel like
Ooh.
some kind of breeze in the air, or some kind of like small heat in the air as you're going past something, and kind of do like a roller coaster that way, or maybe like you would at in Indiana Jones kind of ride where you're going in and out, and you would have like just CGI or whatever around you. I think that'd be dope too. But I think to me it would have to refer to dragons, just
Oh, it
because
has to. Yeah, it has to have some dragons in it somewhere.
yeah.
There was a ride, so they could have rethemed this ride. Actually, there was a ride. I believe it was at Islands of Adventure, but it could have been at Universal Orlando. I'm not sure, but there was a ride called Dueling Dragons, and it was literally an orange track with an orange vehicle and a blue track with a blue vehicle, and they would go through one another. Like it was
Oh
like
shit.
yeah, and it was called Dueling Dragons. So like they could have literally taken that concept, and then you could have said like Vagar versus like whoever, right? And they could have been like that could have been your whole thing. Now that ride was not super well themed. It was just like a coaster, but they could have
Okay.
done that, man. Like could have rethemed that to a Game
Dude,
of
that would have
Thrones.
been perfect.
Perfect,
That would
dude.
have been fucking perfect.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Oh, someone dropped the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck.
Exactly. That ride doesn't even exist anymore. They tore it down.
Oh, they did. Where was that at?
That I think it was at Islands of Adventure in Orlando, but it could have been at
Gotcha.
the other Universal park out there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, I want to thank you for coming on, man. Always a pleasure talking, and especially Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, one of my favorite topics to talk about. But yeah, thank you again for coming on. We're gonna have some kind of, once the season come out, we're gonna go into detail of what we saw about the episode. So I'd love to have you on one of those.
Oh yeah.
Love to have you on. But yeah, if you could tell the people where they can find you on social media, and also where No Vacancy is going to be at once it drops.
Yeah. So you can find me over on X at JaySherer is the best place to follow me. You can also follow me on Instagram here as well, but I'm not really active at all. I like if Tones tags me in something about this podcast, I'll like share it. But that's pretty much all I do. I don't post that much stuff on there. I'm a little bit more active on X. And I have No Vacancy is coming out early next year, like we talked about. Hopefully I have a teaser trailer for everybody really, really soon. In fact, if you want to do a teaser trailer reaction, like I'll come back and we'll do it.
You know that's coming. You know that's coming.
Perfect.
For sure.
That'd be awesome. So that's coming out soon. So stay tuned for that. You can watch the teaser. You can watch on the Condor Blue channel. Condor Blue is the organization that's owned by our director of photography. So Condor Blue's YouTube channel, or it will also be on my How Stories Work with JaySherer channel. So you can follow either of those channels. We'll both post the teaser on those channels. And then we'll get ready to see the film early next year. I'm hoping for January release, but it may be a February release, just how it plays out. We won't know yet. But it was co-written and directed by me. And I got to see a preview of the teaser and I love it. So I can't wait to show you guys. It's going to be really fun. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Had a blast talking about Game of Thrones. We'll definitely come on back on when the episodes are playing. But if you ever want to talk about Marvel or Star Wars or what, Last of Us, whatever you want to talk about, I'm here.
Oh, for sure. That's definitely coming. That's definitely coming. Guys, go check him out. I'll put all his stuff in the description below, and I'll keep a lookout on his social medias for No Vacancy. You guys have to go check it out. I can't wait for it to drop. And like you said, I'd love to have you on and go over the live reaction of the trailer. I think that'd be dope. I think that'd be so fun.
Awesome.
Guys, if you guys want to also watch the video that we did with JaySherer on our Bad Thoughts podcast channel, I'll put that in the description below as well. Amazing conversation about No Vacancy. If you guys want to hear more detail about it, go ahead and check it out there. Also, follow me if you guys want to on social media at tones_TV on all platforms, and leave a comment on what you guys think is going to happen in season 2 of House of the Dragon. And let us know what you guys thought about season 8 of Game of Thrones as well. I'd love to hear you guys' opinions too. All right. Have a great night, guys. Love y'all.